Welcome to our Bench to Bedside and Beyond MedThread, where we'll be discussing a popular topic among Americans and all medical students, caffeine. Here are some pics of the team that put this all together. Take note of the ensign who forgot to bring Red Bull to FTX. Before we start, I'd like to show you a video of a situation we are all very familiar with from the popular TV series Futurama. In this clip, we can see the various effects that caffeine has on Fry.
This isn't Yemeni, it's Sulawesi. And the cup's shaking. I don't want my coffee shaking.
You seem a tad wound up, buddy, and your face is greasy. Real greasy. You been up all night?
Of course I've been up all night. Not because of caffeine, it was insomnia. I couldn't stop thinking about coffee. I need a nap. Coffee time!
Ha ha ha, oh that Fry. During this talk, we'll discuss the use of caffeine, its mechanism of action, the specific effects it has on the body, and finally, the clinical guidelines recommended by the professionals. The most classic form Americans take their caffeine in is coffee, but we have expanded its use to come in the form of soda, energy shots, gum, and even concentrated pills of the good stuff. Caffeine ingestion dates back to the ancient pre-Columbian Mesoamericans, who found that when they ground up and ate certain plants, they were rewarded with a jolt of energy to start their day. The Mayans even realized that the sweet coca bean had this energy-giving property as well. That's right, even chocolate contains caffeine. It's everywhere. Why do we like caffeine so much? Well, I suspect you are all aware of the feeling you get after chugging a caffeine-laden red-eye in the morning. Caffeine grants us mental alertness, improved cognitive performance, increased vigilance and reaction time, and may even make us feel a little bit more in shape. Here is a table with some common energy-granting drinks and the amount of caffeine they contain. Your typical Cup O' Joe will contain about 100 to 130 milligrams of caffeine. But if you really need a boost, you can take a shot of 5-hour energy and imbibe almost double that. Be aware that your typical Starbucks venti will have much more caffeine than this table leads you to believe. Caffeine isn't just in the drinks we use to keep us awake. Many athletes use caffeine to boost their workouts. Dieters utilize the metabolic enhancement to boost weight loss, and some students use caffeine-enriched supplements to boost their brain power. So those bros mixing their protein powder with espresso aren't crazy after all. Caffeine is known to increase athletic performance in all activities, from endurance training such as marathon running to stop-and-go sports like tennis, and even weightlifting. The advantage is so great that the International Olympic Committee has banned caffeine use in its athletes during competitions. Although caffeine seems like an all-around good thing, there are many side effects that can cause trouble. We'll go into those later. But one with some relevance to this slide is a popular weight loss regimen known as ECA, or ephedra, caffeine, and aspirin. This dangerous combination is associated with heart arrhythmias and is not endorsed by any healthcare professionals. Although we do not know explicitly why caffeine has such a profound impact on our body, we have some theories. The metabolic theory states that caffeine's effects on different steps in our metabolism give us that feeling of general well-being with every sip. These include increased fat utilization, the mobilization of free fatty acids, and muscle glycogen sparing, so we have more energy where we need it. Another possible effect is that by lowering the threshold of neuronal activation, caffeine makes everything seem just a little bit easier. Now down to the science. This is very high yield for the Step 1 examination. Examiners love to go after this. Just kidding. This is when you go get a refill. But really, The biochemical properties of caffeine are the reason we love it so much. Caffeine has a similar chemical structure to that of the inhibitory neurotransmitter adenosine. Increased adenosine in the neurosynapses causes drowsiness. Caffeine acts as a competitive inhibitor, that is, it blocks but does not stimulate the adenosine receptor. Beyond causing alertness, antagonism of this receptor leads to an increased breathing rate, reduced heart rate, and constriction of the blood vessels. This would never be possible if caffeine wasn't so lipid soluble and could not cross the blood-brain barrier. Another target of caffeine is the enzyme phosphodiesterase, which it effectively inhibits. Phosphodiesterase, or PDE, is responsible for breaking down an intracellular second messenger known as cyclic AMP. By shutting down PDE, caffeine allows the cell to keep on signaling. The increase in intracellular cyclic AMP activates protein kinase A, an enzyme involved in the regulation of metabolism. Caffeine also inhibits TNF-alpha and leukotriene synthesis, thus reducing inflammation. Caffeine has also been shown to inhibit acetylcholinesterase, an enzyme that breaks down the important neurotransmitter acetylcholine. As we all know, caffeine can be obtained OTC, or over the counter, usually from your local barista. Caffeine is a largely unregulated drug. Why is something which is popularly considered addictive so freely available? Well, that's because studies don't show any significant physical or psychological dependence and no addiction liability, although med students might disagree. While there's no addiction, there are well-documented studies showing withdrawal symptoms after cessation of habitual caffeine ingestion. This typically manifests as headaches, fatigue, drowsiness, and a depressed mood. Further, caffeine is a pregnancy category C drug, meaning that animal studies have shown adverse effects on a developing fetus, but no human studies exist. It is recommended that pregnant females reduce their caffeine intake as much as physically possible. Another point of interest, although we commonly ingest caffeine via the oral route, humans have apparently developed all kinds of ways to take it, even in the form of an enema. The absorption of caffeine is extremely efficient. That is, 99% of it will find its way into your blood. From the time the coffee passes your lips to the time you start feeling its effects takes about 45 minutes. The caffeine in your blood will be removed by the liver and is mainly metabolized by the enzyme CYP1A2 and to some extent by CYP2E1 and CYP3A4. This metabolism displays first-order kinetics, meaning that as concentrations of caffeine increase, so does the rate of metabolism. The amount of time it takes half of the caffeine in your body to metabolize is about 3 to 7 hours. Quite a few drugs affect the metabolism of caffeine. Smokers might need a refill on their latte much sooner due to nicotine's effect. Pregnant women and those with failing livers may have to reduce their intake due to concerns about caffeine accumulation. As with everything, genetics play a huge part in how caffeine affects us. Now we will discuss some of the effects of caffeine system by system. Acutely, caffeine can increase alertness, mental energy, and the ability to concentrate. Habitual drinkers were able to perform better on tests of cognitive performance across the board. Caffeine can also have some negative impacts, such as causing headaches or being associated with anxiety, nervousness, insomnia, and irritability. For those with generalized anxiety or panic disorders, the risk of adverse symptoms is increased. Of note, there are research studies showing a small protective effect of caffeine against the development of Alzheimer's disease. This is likely related to the caffeine's cholinergic effects. Caffeine, and specifically its metabolites, may have inotropic and chronotropic effects on the heart, meaning they can increase both the frequency and power of contraction. Although heavy caffeine consumption has been linked to coronary and arrhythmic events, low to moderate consumption has been shown to be cardioprotective. Although we don't know why, caffeine has been linked to reduced risk for developing type 2 diabetes. Caffeine can stimulate the smooth muscles of the GI tract and has been shown to reduce constipation. Caffeine has been associated with decreased bone mineral density in older women and can increase the risk for osteoporosis. One last thing. In this day and age where everything seems to cause cancer, there has been no link between the consumption of caffeine and cancer. Some studies have also shown that increased caffeine consumption decreases the all-cause mortality rate. By all means, healthcare professionals do not want you to give up your daily ritual. They do recommend limiting consumption to less than 400 milligrams per day, or about 4 8-ounce regular coffees for adults. They do not recommend caffeine consumption by adolescents. While taking part in caffeine consumption, it is important to remember that even moderate doses can affect sleep and thus cognitive performance. We recommend exercising healthy sleep habits and not drinking caffeine in the hours before bedtime. Due to the effect of caffeine on the heart, it is recommended that patients with pre-existing cardiovascular conditions limit their intake of caffeine. Likely due to caffeine's ability to make one nervous, anxious, and irritable, long-term caffeine use has been associated with the development of generalized anxiety disorder. There is also a link between substance abuse and habitual caffeine use. Again, there are some long-term benefits that seem promising. Specifically, the relationships between caffeine consumption and decreased risk for developing Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, alcoholic cirrhosis, and gout. Caffeine can be a very effective supplement, but like anything else, you can have too much of a good thing. Drink wisely. The Stanford Fire Team thanks you for listening. Stay tuned for our next med thread, liposuction, option or obsession.